Hey, this is Rick Brandenburg for Turf Bugs and Rock and Roll. And a few weeks ago, my buddy Fred Yelvert and I were down in Puerto Rico speaking to many of the Caribbean superintendents and turfgrass managers. And here you see us after the conference with Carla Cora, who is the Director of Agronomy at Dorado Beach in Puerto Rico. And we talked about a lot of topics, and I'm wearing my Agro Open shirt, just a nice gift from them. And we always enjoy going down there and talking. And one of the challenges, and you've heard me talk about this before, is the lack of locally generated research. And that's a problem in many parts of the world, and it's even a problem in parts of the states, where some areas like North Carolina has a very good turf program, and some other states don't. And there can be a historical reason for that. It can be a reflection of the size of the turf industry, whatever. But there's not always really good locally generated research data. And in the case of, like many of the islands in the Caribbean, we've learned long ago that we simply cannot take data from South Florida and transpose it onto what's happening in the islands. It just doesn't work. In many cases, due to different soil types, rainfall patterns, it could be different species of the pest, a lot of issues at hand there. But what I want you to understand is there are what sometimes we call thresholds in a pest development based on temperature. And you could say, well, as you go from, say, Maine south to Florida, that things just happen earlier, or they happen faster, or there's more generations. And there's some truth to that. Or as you go from North Dakota to Texas, there's a gradient there. And for example, as you move south, things happen earlier. And there's some truth to that. But the reality is there's oftentimes what we call a threshold. And as you go south, there becomes a point where you go from one generation to, say, 2 generations. Or there's a point where it just is warm enough and the winter's warm enough that instead of it progressing at this rate, it progresses much faster. Not a little stepwise progression, but a gigantic projection because it influences overwintering behavior. So as you look at from north to south, and even in some cases from east to west, it's not necessarily the slow little incremental steps as far as pest development or pest timing. It can sometimes we cross a certain threshold that causes it to speed up dramatically or change dramatically. And the same is true in the Caribbean when we look at it. It's not just, well, it's similar to this, but a little bit warmer. That's not always the case. So as you look at data from other parts of the country, don't say, well, I live in Kentucky and here's data from Michigan, so it's just going to happen a little bit earlier. Because maybe it's going to happen a lot earlier because you've crossed a threshold where instead of 1 generation, you have 2 generations. So locally generated information is always critical. And Fred and I are so thankful we've had an opportunity to work quite a bit in the islands in the Caribbean. We know a little bit about it, just enough to be dangerous, but we've gained some insight into how to best manage these problems. And that's what you have to do at your location. You've got to know what it means for your location, even if it's generated just 1 state away. Hope that helps. Look forward to talking with you again soon.